Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English. You can find me at www.maryenglish.com, maryenglish.co.uk, and UK Astrologer. Hello, how are you? Now, as Mercury is still retrograding, I think it's appropriate for me to do a chart today for someone who was born with Mercury retrograde. Now, I need to point out that there was an interesting article on the BBC website, and it's dated the 4th of August 2024, and it's titled "Blame All Your Problems on Mercury, What Really Happens During a Retrograde." And there's a lovely quote from Dr. Nicholas Campion, Professor of Cosmology and Culture at University of Wales, Trinity St David's. The Mercury retrograde phenomena was discovered during the final century BC, but it wasn't always interpreted as it is today. Dr. Campion says that in medieval times, if someone was trying to answer a question by plotting an astrological chart, Mercury being in retrograde was taken as a sign the answer was negative or that something was unlikely to happen. Quote now, "It is only in the 20th century in the astrology of the English-speaking world that it came to mean delays in particular," unquote, says the astrology expert, adding that this interpretation took over in the 1980s. Dr. Campion says modern astrologists, I hate that word, they're not astrologists, they're astrologers, who subscribe to the influence of Mercury retrograde believe it means plans are going to be put on hold, or it's a bad time to start a new job, or begin something new. Quote, Dr. Campion again, "It is very much a feature of a particular strand of Western astrology," he says. "Western astrology now spreads all over the world through social media and apps, so it is becoming global." Dr. Campion says Mercury retrograde didn't always have the same prominence that it does today. Open quote, "It was always a very minor phenomenon in astrology," close quotes. Now, I'll put a link to that article in the podcast. Say I'm doing it, so I'll just put the link there, and you can read that, because I've told you more than once that I was born with Mercury retrograde, and I have the idea that if you're born with Mercury retrograde, you don't mind repetition of things, and that can be a way of learning. So if I have a client that's got Mercury retrograde, or they're talking about their kiddie with Mercury retrograde, so I've got an interesting idea here that repetition or doing things over and over might help that person learn. So in other words, saying something more than once to or with a person with Mercury retrograde can assist them, because I don't particularly consider Mercury retrograde as awful, because I was born during one. Why would I think it was awful? And so today I'm going to demonstrate a chart for someone who was like myself, born with a Mercury retrograde. And I was sort of wondering to myself while I was reading all about them in the blurb and blub, 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 did it help them or hinder them? And I think Mercury retrograde in their case absolutely assisted their professional life. Now, I don't think it assisted their personal life, but we'll come on to that in just a minute. Now, the person whose chart we're going to look at is Françoise Gauquelin, and I've covered her husband's chart when I did an episode on a thing called the Mars effect. So I did her husband, Michel Gauquelin, in episode 115, and I covered zones of high intensity which was part of their research, in episode 322. So you can ping back and have a listen to those, because they relate to this. But anyway, my point is I want to cover somebody's chart who's got Mercury retrograde natally in their chart. Mercury is retrograde at the moment. What else is there to talk about during a Mercury retrograde other than Mercury retrograde? And Françoise was obviously a woman, because she was the wife of Michel. I think it's pronounced Michel. tell me off if it's wrong. But it's what I find quite dreadful sometimes, is lack of information for women who are married to people that do stuff. Because she was his wife, helped him with all his research, got fed up with him at some point and then divorced him, because we're going to cover all this. Sorry, before that she had a kiddie with him, then she got fed up with him and then she divorced him, and then both of their lives sort of after that sort of went rather downhill. He eventually went off with another woman and committed suicide because he got a bit depressed, and I don't think she remarried. I can't find any information out to say that she did, but she ended up in an old people's home, sort of inverted commas, forgotten. So let's look at her chart and her Mercury retrograde, and I must say, as an example of Mercury retrograde, it's rather fabulous. So off we go. Now, it is quite tricky to find out any information about her, but let's just cover a chart first, and I can read you a little bit of her bio, because there's a teeny bit on Astro Databank, which is so micro-flipping-scopic. Anyway, so Françoise Gauquelin, who was married to this Michel bloke, who was famous for doing a thing called the Mars Effect, was born on the 19th of June 1921 in Neuchâtel, Neucha umlaut Tel, Neuchâtel in Switzerland, and was born at 4 a.m. So we assume that because she ended up hanging about with astrologers, we assume that the birth time's reasonably correct. Now, I would have thought being born in Switzerland, there'd be a birth chart knocking about somewhere. And let's just have a look at her chart shape and why I think it's a lovely example of Mercury. So she's got a Gemini ascendant. Her sun sign is Gemini, 27 degrees. Her ascendant is 16 degrees Gemini, 41 minutes, 34 seconds. And her Mercury is 14 degrees, 3 minutes and 10 seconds retrograde, also into the sign of Gemini. So basically, she has Mercury conjunct the ascendant by about, so the ascendant is 16 degrees and Mercury is 14 degrees, give or take a few minutes here or there. So it's just under 2 degrees different. However, it actually falls in the equal house system, falls into her 12th house, but Mercury's flipping near the ascendant. Okay, and that's now the reason I wanted to use her chart example, because when I was searching Astro Databank, so if we're going to talk about Mercury retrograde, what's the ruler to Mercury, Mary? What sign does it rule? Well, it rules Gemini. So I was going to do 2 charts. I haven't got the brain cells to do that, so I'm just going to do the one. But also maybe next week I'll do somebody with a Virgo ascendant and their Mercury being retrograde in whatever sign. So I'm not bothered about the sign the sun's in, but the fact that Mercury's retrograde and she has a Gemini ascendant, because Mercury is the ruler to the chart. So one would assume that someone with a Gemini ascendant, who's a sun sign Gemini, who's Mercury's retrograde and is pretty near to the ascendant, is going to be pretty good at some form of communication in some way. Well, she is a wonderful example of that. So let me just read you a bit of her biog. And here we go. So she was born Marie-Françoise Schneider Gauquelin. So the birth name was Schneider. Was born on 19th of June 1921, 4 a.m. in Neuchâtel, Switzerland. Passed away on 10th of August 2007, and Joigny in my French pronunciation is dreadful. Joigny in the Yonne region of France. This was sad news for those who knew her well, especially researchers of neo-astrological problems with whom Françoise had collaborated relations, as I had. This is written by a guy called Stuttbert Ertel, as I had from 1985 to 1998. So, her formal qualifications. Françoise obtained a diploma in psychology education at the University of Geneva. At the Psychological Institute, University of Sorbonne, Paris. She graduated in psychotechnique and psychopathology, and at the Sorbonne Institute of Statistics she obtained a diploma in statistique in 1960 with the thesis L'heure de la naissance. Françoise and Michel thus graduated from universities but did not attain a PhD. This title was wrongly attached to their names in the list of consulting editors of Correlation. So she didn't have a PhD, but she certainly had a degree. So in 1985, when I first contacted her, Françoise sent me a copy of her curriculum of the Gauquelin investigations, in which she describes the 1950s and 1960s as follows. Following the same course in applied psychology at the Sorbonne as me, Michel made my acquaintance and we fell in love. His first positive results, obtained in 1950 using 576 births from the Index biographique des membres de l'Académie de Médecine, impressed me but did not convince me. So we started investigation of a second group of famous medical doctors. The outcomes were the same, which impressed me very much. My contribution at that stage can be described as bringing order and finishing up what was unfinished, like a good secretary or apprentice. Michel had a leading role, for I knew very little about astrology. He acknowledged my contribution by marrying me in 1954, and I gave the money for publishing La Influence de Astro in 1955. That was Michel's first book. Anyway, and those, I think there's about 4 sentences there. Very useful. I love that bit where she says, at that stage, my contribution can be described as bringing order and finishing up what was unfinished. Now, isn't that a sort of a Mercury retrograde thing, that you're going back and redoing something? So she was going through and doing and redoing the stuff that he was churning out. Now, I just got to remember a teeny bit about his chart, so hold on a sec. So this bloke that she met at uni and studied with, I don't know if they're on the same course, but anyway, he had a Leo ascendant, Sun in Scorpio and Moon in Saggy. She's got a Gemini ascendant, Sun in Gemini and Moon in Scorpio. So I can understand how they might have sort of kicked it off to start with. She would have quite enjoyed that Leo ascendant. But he was a Scorpio, okay, and his Mercury's in Scorpio. He was a Scorpio. And the most challenging combos of sun signs of the zodiac to bring each other tons of grief is when you combine Gemini and Scorpio, because they don't really have much of a relationship. Gemini's ruled by Mercury, it's airy-fairy, light and fluffy, and Scorpio is deep, and I'm not going to tell you my secrets, and blah, 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 all of this, yeah? So tricky, wicky dicky. But anyway, the ascendants are what attracts people to each other to start with. So let us continue. Now, we know on the website that I'm quoting from that they got married in 1954, but neither of them in the blurb that their people are quoting have actually, how awful of them, have put the date that they got married, and barely dates of much else other than the divorce. But anyway, I'm just going to share with you the transits for, so she's getting married now, it's 1954, so how old would that have made her? Hold on. Yeah, 25 years old, so she's still teeny weeny. That's young age, isn't it? So I've just saved their marriage. Where have I put it? Hold it, I've lost it. So looking at the transit for a 1954 marriage, what the outer planet's doing, because we're not going to know what the sun and the moon and all the other stuff is. Pluto's exactly conjunct to her Mars. I think transiting Pluto is 22 degrees Leo and her Mars is 20 degrees. And don't forget, he's got a Leo ascendant. Transiting Uranus is now 20 degrees into Cancer, and her natal Pluto is 17 degrees Cancer. And Mars is retrograding in June that year, so I don't know how long it retrograded for, but it's in June it's retrograding through her 7th house, so I'm going to have to do another look. Hold on. The reason I used the 1st of June as the transit, that's the middle of the year. Mars started into the sign of Capricorn on the 13th of April. It started going retrograde on the 24th of May 1954. Carried on retrograding. Is that right? Still retrograding. Didn't go direct until the 30th of July, and then carried on going back through because it went all the way back to 25 degrees Saggy, and he'd got moon in Saggy, if I remember rightly, yeah. And then it started going back into Capricorn again on the 25th of August. So that particular year there was a Mars, because it doesn't retrograde all the time, did a pretty lengthy retrograde. So going back to her chart, she's got her moon in Scorpio in the 6th house, and the moon is how we feel, and the 6th house is health. So she's going to manifest any illnesses through her emotions. If you've got your moon in the 6th, be aware of, you can affect your health. This is totally different from having the sun or any other planet, because the moon is the unconscious, the subconscious. Go be careful what's going on in the back of your mind and get some hypnotherapy or go do some meditation. And her natal moon is in Scorpio. He was a Scorpio. Because I can see, I can perfectly understand how they got together to start with, but it's not going to be a long, or if it is a long-term thing, there's going to be some struggles here and there. Anyway, this podcast isn't about her compatibility to him. This is about her Mercury and what goes on with it and what it's all like and stuff. So I forgot to tell you about the rest of her chart. She's got Sun 27 degrees in the 1st house, Pluto 17 degrees in the 2nd house, because I know a number of you listening don't manage to get to see the show notes. She's got Mars in Leo, 20 degrees in the 3rd house, and Neptune there in Leo, 29 degrees. Her 4th and 5th house are empty in equal house. Doesn't matter, that's going to happen. She's got her moon in Scorpio in the 6th house, 24 degrees Scorpio. She's got Saturn retrograde in Saggy. Is that right? Yeah, Saggy, 27 degrees. Saturn retrograde 27 degrees in the 7th house. He's got moon in Saggy. As I'm not doing that compatibility, but that wouldn't have helped. We've got the 8th house is empty, and her MC's there in the sign of Aquarius, 16 degrees. I think it's in her 8th. 1642 is the ascendant. Yes, it's just towards the end of her 8th. 9th house is empty. 10th house has Uranus, the erratic planet, in the 10th house. 11th house is Venus in Taurus, conjunct Chiron. And then 12th house is North Node in Taurus, and Jupiter in Gemini 1 degree, and then the Mercury retrograde 14 degrees. So if we're just taking what's in her 12th house, so her life purpose is to reveal the unconscious, subconscious dreams, that type of, which is not quite what she did because she did astrology, but anyway, covers that. Jupiter's located there. Jupiter's about, what do I believe? Believe in the self. If it's in the 12th, which isn't retrograde in her case, but it is in the 12th, need to check belief in the self. Now, Astro.com is saying that the moon and Jupiter are in opposition, but they're out of sign, within orb, but outside, because her Jupiter is in Gemini and her moon's in Scorpio, so I don't know, I'd totally go with that one. But the sun is definitely opposition to Saturn, so the sun's 27 degrees Gemini, Saturn is 27 degrees Saggy, and they're in direct opposition, and Saturn is retrograding in her 7th house. So she would have felt responsible for the relationship, or any relationship that is, and as far as I know, but I don't know because no one's going to tell me. There's hardly anything in the internet about her. And I don't speak French, so I can't search on French websites. I'd have to use Google Translate. Sun opposition Saturn is not particularly friendly aspect to have in your 7th house of close personal relationships, because the person, anywhere there's Saggy, wants to be free. That's the signature of freedom, is Saggy. If you've got a Saggy 7th house and Saturn's going to weigh it down, Saturn isn't happy in the sign of Sagittarius. I've got Jupiter in Capricorn, which is a similar thing. That it's just like, ooh, ow, and it's retrograde as well. Okay, so I would be advising somebody that has that signature, if they're going to go into a close personal relationship, then they need to know whether the exit is, if they ever need to use it, which is what she did. She got divorced. Divorce was perfectly legal then. Other aspects, the Sun doesn't really aspect much, just that opposition to Saturn, and there's a sextile to Neptune, because Neptune's in Leo, so they're okay. The moon's got far more aspects. So moon square Mars, moon opposition Jupiter, moon square Neptune, moon trine Pluto, moon opposition the North Node. Oh, it is as well. Look at that. And then Mercury only makes one aspect, which is a sextile to Uranus, and the conjunction to the ascendant. I'm not doing inconjuncts, because I don't think those are inconjuncts. No, they're not. There's something else. Aspects, no idea where they are. Can't be bothered to look them up. And we've got Mars and Venus are square to each other. So Mars is our energy, Venus is our love, and they're having a shouting match. And I don't know what it was like in their relationship. So let us move on. So now she's, let me go back to me biog. She's now with him. They've got married in 1954. He's studying traditional chart factors. She is, what's she doing? Besides the many articles that Françoise published in Astro Psychological Problems, she found time to make additional contributions to it which deserve particular tribute. First, she submitted to a seminal book, Astrological Research Methods, edited by Mark Pottinger, 1995, 17 condensed articles on various topics of Gauquelin research. Second, and no less notable, is her article of defence against the attempt by French skeptics to defame the Gauquelin approach. The skeptics had collected with apparent selection bias new birth data of sports champions. At 91 at the Euroskeptics conference in Amsterdam, I assisted Françoise by presenting an analysis of the skeptics' data, pointing out a methodological bias that Françoise had correctly suspected. So she's a researcher. That is part of her diploma in Statistique. So psychotechnique and psychopathology. So she's always interested in how the mind works, which very much is Geminis love to be interested in things. And then she did her first hereditary project. We've got two different biogs on this one page. I'm sort of jumping about between the two of them. She did go to America at some point. There is successive correlation, which the Astrological Association publishes that. So let's just go on to, I mean, she wrote a load of books, The Psychology of Planets, and she contributed to this journal that she started. And we just talked about journal, and that's very much a Mercury thing. Let's just go on to where the hell we are. I just want to find out where. Yes, except for her 3 joint NCGR issues. So that's the NCGR. What's that stand for? Hold on, I'm lost. Oh, I apologise. The NCGR is the National Council for Geocosmic Research, and they're based in Massachusetts. Okay, so she was helping with their quarterly journal. See, Gemini loves that sort of thing, writing. The present editor of the Astrological Association's journal is a Gemini, so that's very much a Gemini thing. New issue coming out all the time, different stuff we can write about, blah blah blah. But she did a lot of writing herself, and I just want to quote this one bit. So this is during her life, yeah. Doing everything herself. Except for the 3 joint NCGR issues, Françoise did everything herself: compiling, editing, writing, typing, photocopying, stapling, addressing and mailing. The circulation is not recorded in the APP, but was probably about 150, equivalent to a stack of A4, nearly half a metre high per mailing. While astrologers talked and talked about talking, Françoise, like Michel, delivered. So yeah, so she wrote quite a bit in her life, and she was very much into statistics and proper research methodology. Okay, don't ask me about that because I don't know anything about it, but such a thing does exist, and it was a big thing for her. Now, we also find out, and I can only do this with the transit, so we've had a look at a transit, what might be the marriage. Now, I can only guess, but we know that she had a boy, and he was called Daniel. Well, they had a boy. So Michel and Françoise had a baby boy called Daniel, and he was born on the 22nd of April 1967. Now, I presume he was born in Paris, but I don't know, because it says in the biog that she moved about the place quite a bit. Yeah, it says here, Françoise's many contacts within Europe and her fluency in French, English, German and Italian, which would have been helpful when the Gauquelins were collecting birth data in Italy 1956, Germany 1957, Belgium and Holland 1958. Okay, so she's moved about quite a bit. So I don't know where the baby was born. So I can only do a transit chart here. So the day that he was born, the sun was in Taurus and the moon was in Virgo, and it's not far away from the Pluto-Uranus conjunction. So I don't know what time of day, if you do a transit, that Astro Databank does it. Probably does it for 12 o'clock. Got no idea what time Astro Databank chooses for a transit chart. So I've just put the transits for 22nd of April 67, because it's definitely the date that Daniel was born. Can't find anything on the internet about him, but I haven't killed myself trying to find him. But his moon's pretty near to that Uranus Pluto conjunction, and the moon represents mum, and he didn't live with his mum, so I've read that he lived with his dad, and then eventually daddy got a new wife, I think, and then eventually managed to kill himself. So I mean, that's going to be pretty much a trauma when you're growing up. So Sun Taurus, Moon Virgo, Mercury Aries is Mercury's out of sign. Venus 8 degrees Gemini, which is quite nice because mummy's got Mercury 14 degrees. Mars 22 degrees Libra, Jupiter 25 degrees Cancer, Saturn 6 degrees Aries, Uranus is 20 degrees retrograde into Virgo, and Neptune's 23 degrees Scorpio, and Pluto's 18 degrees retrograde in Virgo. It's giving me the true node. The North Node is in Taurus. But I don't know whether or not that's going to take any time into account. But if we're looking at her chart, what would have been the impact of having this child? So what are the transits for the day that she's giving birth? And what's nice is that Venus is transiting over the ascendant. So Venus in Gemini is going to eventually pass over ascendant. I can't find a word about anything else about, why baby didn't stay with mummy. But look at Neptune. So Neptune's 23 degrees Scorpio, and she herself has moon 23 degrees Scorpio. So don't know, did she have loads of drugs on the birth? no idea. And this is a Taurus baby that she's given birth to, and she's an air sign. I wouldn't like to comment. And Mars is transiting through her 5th house, and it's retrograding. So baby's got Mars retrograde, Uranus retrograde, Neptune retrograde, and Pluto retrograde, but not Mercury, which is what Mummy has. So that's the date of the birth of Daniel. So we shall carry on. Now, considering these people were researchers and statisticians and all the rest of it, they're like being able to find flipping dates and things. The date they got divorced. So baby's born in 1960 something. What's the year? I say it was 1967. So it didn't take that long. So how old would baby be? Let me just do the maths on there 1 minute. Oh, Daniel was only 18 when his parents got divorced. That's awful. So we got the date they got divorced, and apparently was very bitter. So there's a couple of Astro data bank and somewhere else I read about it. They put the divorce was bitter, whatever that means. I don't know who was getting grumpy. But in Françoise's case, Chiron is now exactly conjunct her ascendant. So surely she should have checked that in her own chart. And the North Node is, just on that date, the North Node is exactly conjunct her natal Chiron. So natal Chiron is 12 degrees Taurus, transiting, what did he call it, transiting North Node? But the North Node's 9 degrees, so it's pretty near to it. And her natal Venus is 12 degrees Taurus. But transiting Chiron is retrograde at 14 degrees 39 minutes, exactly splumph onto her ascendant. Now I'm only making assumptions here, I don't know for sure, but if he's gone off with another woman, or Michel is living with another woman, eventually marries her, to be able to marry her, he's going to have to divorce her, and obviously he's deciding to divorce her because has he already found this other woman? I don't know, because it didn't give me the details on that. But Uranus is just about to enter her 7th house. So transiting Uranus is 14 degrees and 27 minutes, and her 7th house will start at 16 degrees 41 minutes. So Uranus is just about to go pachang into her 7th. It hasn't got there. And the other major transit, so we've got Chiron on the ascendant, we've got transiting Saturn is now conjunct, exactly conjunct her moon. So for whatever the reasons were for the divorce, it would be quite a big thing if that's what's going on during that transit, because transiting Saturn's 24 degrees Scorpio and her natal moon is 23 degrees Scorpio, 59 minutes, so it's nearly 24 degrees. So yeah, Saturn on your moon's a bit harsh. The moon's how you feel, and Saturn's the sort of a responsibility planet. But it was an acrimonious thing. So I don't know what the finances were afterwards, because that's always a consideration when you separate with somebody, what you're going to do for money. You know, you can't work when you've had a kid. I mean, the kid is now 18, so Daniel's now 18, so maybe he goes and gets a job. I don't know, I can't find anything about him. And the moon, transiting moon, is 28 degrees Aquarius, and the sun is 2 degrees Libra. Venus and Mars are in Virgo. So how is this impacting her house? So you've got her houses. You've got transiting Pluto in her 5th, transiting Jupiter in her 8th, going to other people's money, and it's retrograde. And the moon is still in Aquarius, but it's in her 9th. So I don't know what she did immediately after the divorce. No idea. So a year after the divorce, and we're now 1986, on this astrologyandscience.com website, it says Cora whatever Cora stands for, we'll come to that. So 1986, this is the year afterwards, Françoise became the first secretary of SNX Cora, Committee for Objective Research into Astrology, which was set up to counter the generally poor quality of astrological research by providing free advice. Only a few inquiries were received each year, most of which did not proceed further. Following SNX's death in 1997, Cora continued for a short while, then lapsed due to the drying up of even this meagre interest. Then we got Rams, whatever that is. So in 1991, Françoise, together with Suzelle Vauzeur-Brigitte, 1928 to 2008, and two other French researchers founded the French research groups RAMS, short for Recherche Astrologique Méthodes Statistiques, or Astrological Research with Statistical Methods, on the 2nd of March 1992. But that says CAPAP, page something to, that's what it was written in. The idea was a simple one. Starting in September 92 with Françoise as editor, Rams would publish a journal that would replace APP, but Françoise left shortly afterwards because in her view, Rams was pursuing research areas that the Gauquelins had shown to be fruitless, rather than areas that promised positive results. The first issue of the new journal, Les Cahiers du Rams, eventually appeared in April 93, with the S now standing for Scientifiques. Recent writings. Among Françoise's most recent and valuable contributions were her clarifying answers to questions about registry offices and birth registrations, which were of great help to my own discovery of social artifacts in the Gauquelin data, and her concise articles on data, statistics, and the latest findings in the anthology Astrological Research Methods. Here, the typical practicing astrologer's objections to statistics would not survive a conversation with a good, would not, quote, survive a conversation with a good statistician, and are in any case accommodated by matching tests using the whole chart, even though Françoise's own matching test of German astrologers had given results that were totally disappointing. Yes, so the last speaking conference she attended was in November 96, and in 1997, aged 68, she moved to an old people's home in Joigny, 130 kilometres southeast of Paris, where she died on the 10th of August 2007. Forgotten and neglected by astrologers worldwide until now. If nothing else, she had shown how determination and the scientific spirit can prevail over the challenges posed by astrology. If she saw further than most, it was not because she stood on the shoulders of giants, but because, like Michel, she stood on the shoulders of data. Her example will be sorely missed. So we've got the transits for her death, and she dies on the 10th of August 2007. She's got transiting Mars is 1 degree Gemini. Her natal Jupiter is 1 degree Gemini. So I think Mars is the majorish planet that would have been, inverted commas, felt while she was dying. Because we've got Mars conjunct natal Jupiter, transiting Sun conjunct natal Mars. We've got Moon conjunct natal Pluto. We've got transiting Pluto retrograde, conjunct natal Saturn retrograde, because transiting Pluto is 26 degrees Saggy and natal Saturn is 27 degrees Saggy, 12 minutes. So we've got, that's quite a busy death chart. And if we're thinking that Mercury is the ruler to her chart, and transiting Mercury is in Leo, and the Sun is in Leo because she's dying in the summer. Saturn's there, and Venus is retrograding as well. So she was born during a Mercury retrograde and dies during a Venus retrograde, Uranus retrograde, Neptune retrograde, Pluto retrograde, because her only retrograde planets in her birth chart are Mercury and Saturn. So I don't know what led up to her, what her illness was, but it mentions in that article that the last conference or whatever she went to, she didn't look very well. And exactly conjunct to her MC is transiting Chiron. MC is 16 degrees Aquarius. Transiting Chiron is 12, and transiting Neptune is 20. I wonder if she died in her sleep or not. So this is just a podcast today. This episode is about somebody born with Mercury retrograde. She managed to cram an awful lot into a short space of time. She wrote considerable amounts for the various different publications. There was one publication she wrote, there was 30 pages of her writing, so she was a prolific writer, but researcher, statistician, can't say it. And so in that short sort of Peter Pan life that she had, sort of Gemini, I was thinking Peter Pan, Gemini energy, or sort of fairies type of thing. They're light and fluffy like a butterfly. She managed to achieve a hell of a lot, and also in typical Gemini manner, she knew a lot of people who knew a lot of people, and she was sociable and going out and doing stuff. And Sun in the first house as well is going to be getting out there and doing it. Less likely to be shy when you've got Sun in the first, especially when it's a Gemini. And I like the fact that she was multilingual as well. That would be the Mercury retrograde. Obviously learned that from repetition or immersion into languages, I don't know. So if you yourself have Mercury retrograde, then do send your chart in and we will talk about it. And you can tell me a bit about your Mercury retrograde and how it has or hasn't affected you, or what might not have happened because of it. And we can analyse it. I actually like charts of Mercury retrograde. I think they're very interesting. In fact, everything about astrology is interesting. So I hope you have a fab week, and I'll be back next week. Bye bye now.